Quinn, welcome to the Apollo Papyrus podcast.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here, and I appreciate you having me on.
Feel free to introduce yourself to our listeners.
I am recently retired in the beginning of 2023, live out in Gig Harbor, Washington. And prior to retiring, I worked for 26 years as a flight attendant, and then about another 15 years as a real estate agent, where I did most of our marketing for the group that I was with. And when I retired, I wanted to finish up a book that I had been working on for a while and begin the process of working as an author for fun and for personal fulfillment.
Your memoir, which is going to be the main focus of this interview, is titled Stick Figures A Big Brother Remembers. Without spoiling too much about your memoir, what is it about?
Sure. I've been a Big Brother volunteer at three different times. The first was in 1980 in Minneapolis, where I was a Big Brother to a guy for 4 years out there. And then we kept on in touch after I moved out to Washington. And the second one was in 1992, where I met a 7-year-old boy with some disabilities. His name was Michael. And the memoir itself is about that period of time, for about a 13-year period of time where we were together. And the name of the book comes from the fact that when I first met him, I gave him a calendar. So he had a little bit of trouble with transitions, and I figured that would help him to be able to see when we were going to get together the next time. And what we ended up doing in that is when we would get home from a match together, we would sit down with his mom and talk, and he would get the calendar, and then I'd write when we're getting to get together next time. But in the day of we had just completed, I would make little stick figure drawings of what we had done, just real simple, a big guy, a little stick guy, and whether we had gone swimming or gone to a game or a movie, something like that. So that eventually gave him, over a 4-year period, it gave him a written history of what we had done, which he'd flip through occasionally and take a look at. And then when he hit puberty, he developed mental illness, which took our journey on a whole different ride. And the memoir itself covers that period of time and what we each went through during that period of time.
For our listeners who may not be familiar with the concept of a big brother, this person you wrote this memoir about your experience with him is not biologically your brother, but you were a mentor for him as part of the Big Brothers Big Sisters program here in the United States.
Correct. In both of those cases, that was the deal. They were matching adult males with boys that apparently didn't usually have an adult male contact consistently, whether the father wasn't in the home or they didn't have an uncle or someone else with. And when I met Michael, the kid in the story, he had been in and out of foster homes since the age of 2, and the woman that was his foster mother for the most of that time was adopting him. Her name was Betty, and so when the period of time that I knew him, she was his mom, excuse me, and she was 63 years old at the time, and he was 7, and her family also helped with caring for him and whatnot, but. So there was no biological relationship between the two of us. I came from a family of 9 children, and my impetus for being a big brother in the first place was seeing TV commercials about the program. And then when I moved away from home, I could not comprehend what it would be like to not have your father in your life. So I became a volunteer at that point. And that's my only affiliation with Big Brothers and Big Sisters, is having those 3 matches that I have worked with.
How did your little brother that you mentored, how did his mental illness affect you?
When it first hit, he had always kind of had some unique behaviors, but when it first hit, he was, a teenager, and you're kind of like, well, this kind of strange behavior, but knowing what's strange behavior in a teenager is sometimes kind of difficult to determine what's strange and what's not. But eventually he got to the point where he could no longer live at home. It was not safe for him to live with his adoptive mother anymore. And he started on a progression of group homes or running away from group homes and hanging out on the streets. And then he was finally institutionalized for mental illness. I kept seeing him during that entire period, and what it did for me, it was a real time of questioning on why that would happen to somebody. What was my role to be? What is am I doing any good for him at any point? But I just wanted him to have somebody in his life as or adoptive mother was aging, who was there consistently as a friend that he knew he could count on. And so I saw him every couple of weeks. There were times when I would call to set up a match meeting and he would no longer be at that place, that he had been removed or kicked out. And so it was a challenge. But for me, it was a big questioning period, a big lesson on acceptance, a big eye-opening to what families go through with somebody that has mental illness and needs treatment and has difficulty finding places for them to live and to stay safe. So it was a real adventure for me, and it affected my life profoundly. And I'm real grateful for the time we had together in that. So it was powerful on both ends.
As you are an openly gay man, what challenges have you faced in serving as a mentor? And by challenges, that may or may not mean discrimination.
The challenges I had with it I was not out in the first relationship. I had told them I was a heterosexual, and they had informed me that their national position was that they would accept gay applicants, but the mother would be told, but I didn't disclose that to them at that point, and it was not an issue. And later, as I came out to their family and whatnot, it was no issue. The only place I really felt some discrimination, well, I didn't feel it. I got it when I went to apply as for Big Brothers the second time in Seattle at the chapter of King County. They were at the orientation meeting. The man stood up and said, "We're looking for heterosexual role models for our kids." And when I talked to him afterwards, they had had a lawsuit that they had against the agency probably 4 or 5 years earlier. And as a result of that, they weren't accepting gay applicants. And what they were doing was, not even accepting an application. They wouldn't even talk to you if you were gay at a time when they had several hundred kids on a waiting list to be matched with Big Brothers and a shortage of volunteers. And I came to them as someone who had already been a Big Brother successfully, had all, the references of my previous family that I had worked with. They could check anything, but it was no. And so I met with the executive director the following day, and then eventually wrote him a letter and told him, express my feelings about that. They then called me about 6 months later and said that they had changed their policy in line with the national organization. And at the time, they were only one of about 4 or 5 agencies in the entire country that took that position of not accepting gay applicants. The challenges beyond that, I felt that at times they were really scrutinizing us and very jumpy about the time you were spending with them or anything along that lines. And I understood that coming from a place where some of the caseworkers didn't have quite the experience that they needed to work with a handicapped child like Mike. His communication skills were really, really difficult. And also I felt that having been in an agency there where they had for several years had a flat out discrimination policy, it was tough for them to learn how to transition into not being suspicious of everybody who comes to them and tells them they're gay and is matched with a little brother. But overall, it did not bother me from that point. Mike and I never got into discussing our sexuality. We came up. I had with his mother an agreement, or I had with the kid an agreement that if something came up in our conversations or anything during the time we were together that I felt his mom needed to know, we would tell her either when I was still there, or he had the option of telling her later. And told him I would call to make sure he told her, but he always chose to come clean on stuff when Big Brother was in the room. I think it shielded him from thinking he was going to get in trouble. But it there were challenges, but it didn't hinder our relationship. And it was important. And I'm and the third time I have been in it, there's no qualms about, as long as you're open with your sexuality. They screen people very, very carefully for volunteers. They screen them. I think I had about 6 hours of interviews on my whole personal life, everything prior to being matched with Mike. So it's a pretty thorough thing.
You've also written a work of fiction. It's titled Raft Island Treasure Hunters. Without spoiling too much about your work of fiction, what is that book about?
Raft Island is a little island outside of Gig Harbor. In fact, that's where I live. And it was actually that book was written first as a gift for some people who were coming to visit here with their kids. And I wrote that for their visit prior to them coming out, and then we gave it to them. And what it is these kids hear a story about a pirate around a campfire, and then it takes various scenes from around where I live and some of our neighbors, the characters in the neighborhood, and puts together a thing where these two kids hear that story of the treasure, and they decide they're going to go looking for it. And it's a probably an early reader kind of book, but a little chapter book, or it's a good read to story. And it's kind of fun and has a pretty uplifting ending to it. So that's where that came from. Currently, I'm working on some stuff, stories and whatnot around my growing up and the antics of my brothers and sisters and all of us had growing up in that size of a family was pretty fun. So putting some of that together, how it all molds together is still a question mark, but it's always fun to do that kind of writing.
What motivates you as an author?
What motivates me is I enjoy the writing. It actually is something that makes me feel good. I enjoy the aspect of putting words together. I always credit the beginning of my writing career as when I was in high school, and my mother was a staunch Democrat, and I wrote her a fake letter from the Nixon reelection campaign saying we identified her as a staunch supporter, and we were sure she could give us a big donation for the campaign. And I was at home when she got the letter, and it had quite the reaction.
Oh,
And to me, that was pretty fun that to see that just arranging words and doing creative stuff like that with them had a power that was fun, and you could see. I enjoyed the reaction. I leveled with her that, yeah, Mom, they're not coming to knocking on your door, but those sort of things. I wrote a lot of copyright for home advertising in the real estate career that took it took a different kind of, you had to really compact things. You had to shake it up for every different house a little bit. That was fun, but it got wearing at the end of it. So I enjoy the author type thing. I've learned a lot, learned about the book making process, the publishing process, the unending promotion of the book, and it's been a really fun experience.
what are the challenges and rewards of writing books and having your books published?
I think the challenge is the time involved and the promotion of it is a challenge. What is rewarding from it is when people read it and you get feedback from it, positive, negative, whatever it is, but just to get that kind of feedback that especially in the book I wrote, the stick figures book, I have met with book clubs and different places with that, and often there is somebody in that group that has dealt with somebody in their family or a friend with mental illness, and they share their experience with it. And some of them have said it's been really helps them see, it explains some of what somebody else is going through in the same thing. It's been supportive for them. So those are rewards. And it was, for me also, it was a tribute to the little brother, and to put his story out there. That was important to me, because there's so many people out there that are behind the scenes that go through these sort of things that you don't even realize. And if somebody else can read that, and if somebody else can understand about mentoring, then and get involved in mentoring, then that's a real plus, and that's worth it. So those are the challenges and the rewards, and doing different things like podcasts and interviews. That's been really fun too. Meet some really fabulous people and hear some great stories. That's really fun.
Are both of your books independently, traditionally, or hybrid published, or did you use different publishing methods for each of your books?
They're both independently published, and the main reason for that is the time frame involved in traditionally, and I thought I would try that, and it has. I meet with an authors group, the Greater Gig Harbor Literary Society, monthly, and that was really helpful in meeting some other people who had done this, and you realize it's it's a smaller circulation and whatnot, but it is kind of fun. It's kind of an engaging business, and so that's why they're both done independently.
One final question. What is the best advice you could offer to anyone who is considering writing a book for the first time?
My experience was the stuff that helped me the most is first of all having the writing and keep practicing it and get I actually took classes over the like adult education type fun stuff over the period of time going into this that was real helpful. You learned about the use of dialogue and structure and suspense, and I read a tremendous amount of blogs of people who on writing, the publishing, all of that, and then finding a group of people who have done this or who have done some publishing and learning from them, learning about the different ways that they sell their books or the different ways that they present them. Are the things you have to have. You have to have a drive for it. You have to have some continued discipline to keep at it. But it also is very, very, very helpful that you have to break out of that shell of isolation where it's just you and the keyboard and reach out and learn from other people who are involved in it. And that's a really, really helpful thing. The woman who taught some of the writing classes I took, she still looks over my writing for me, has edited many of it. The people who in the authors group, there's people who write every genre who have done several books, and some are on their first or second. All those things you'll learn from everybody, and it makes it a fun process. The more you can get out and do some events. This weekend we're doing an arts festival, and there's probably about 25 of us different authors there, and whether you sell a lot of books or not, it's still a good hangout. You get to meet these people, you get to learn about them, and that's kind of nice, especially being retired. I have to make sure that I don't sit at home in front of the keyboard all day long, and that's a good way to do it, is get out there and meet some people, do some events. But you have to keep writing, and to develop a discipline to do it even when you don't want to do it.
Dennis, thank you for appearing on the Apollo Papyrus podcast. You were an amazing guest to interview.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And I appreciate you having me on, and I enjoy the work that you do, and best of luck in the things that you have coming up in the coming months, and keep up the good work.
This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this podcast episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.